Whether the goal was to show off the most intricate and expensive dishes, or to keep your guests too occupied to stage a revolt, history is full of elaborate banquets. Exquisite feasts, full of delicious food, music, games, and other entertainment, have been a traditional form of gathering and celebration for centuries. And some of these parties were so legendary, people are still talking about them today. So, today we're taking a bite out of the most decadent banquets in history. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, leave a comment and let us know what other infamous tales of debauchery you would like to hear about. Okay, time to get tore up from the floor up. In 1873, a German businessman reserved Delmonico's in New York for himself and 74 of his closest friends. The meal's custom table took a week to make, was 24 feet wide, and featured a pond of swans in the middle. A 35-piece band provided music for the guests. The flowers alone cost $3,000, which, for context, is about $75,000 in 2023. For that kind of money, those flowers had better sing with the band. The meal started at 8 p.m. It lasted several hours, with guests taking a break to dance and shift all that food and drink around. After midnight, eating resumed for another hour or two, and more dancing followed until 4 a.m. It's tiring just to say all this. Overall, the feast cost $10,000, or over $250,000 today. Apparently, those Germans know how to party, yeah? In 1520, Henry VIII of England met Francois I of France in a valley just south of Calais to solidify a peace accord. The meeting kicked off 18 days of feasts, games, dances, and religious services. And all the while, you know some guy was in the corner like, can't we just sign the treaty and go home? Henry VIII, being Henry VIII, sent a team of 6,000 men ahead to build a temporary castle on the field. 2 fountains in front of the structure provided guests with an estimated 17,000 gallons of beer and wine. The feast involved some 98,000 eggs, more than 2,000 sheep, 13 swans, 3 porpoises, and the party magician, we assume. Queen Victoria reigned over the British Empire during the Victorian era, which is a heck of a coincidence. When she and Prince Albert married, she became the first British queen to wed during her reign in 300 years, which is possibly why the cake they served at their wedding weighed 300 pounds. Either that or they just really liked cake. The 3-tiered dessert featured a facsimile of the bride and groom in Greek attire, including orange blossoms and myrtle to match Victoria's wedding gown, making it one of history's first ever wedding cakes, as we think of them today. In 2016, Christie sold a slice of this cake at auction. This literal piece of history went for £1,500, or around 2,500 2023 US dollars. Let's hope it came with a glass of milk. Even though Richard III only ruled as King of England and Ireland for 2 years, he still got a big coronation banquet. Hey, people went through a lot of kings back then. You had to get your big party in quick. The festivities lasted for 2 days. Because the church required Fridays to be meatless affairs, the kitchen staff served all kinds of aquatic creatures, including tench, bass, conger eel, salmon, sole, perch, roach, freshwater crayfish, and trout. When asked to comment, all these fish said, apparently we're not meat. Food in Richard's time was heavily spiced, mostly to cover the taste of anything that was a little spoiled, or a lot. Thus, the kitchen team used 2 pounds of pepper, half a pound of saffron, 1 pound of ginger, 16 pounds of sugar, 1 pound of cloves, 1 pound of sandalwood, 8 pounds of dates, 8 pounds of raisins, 6 pounds of prunes, 20 pounds of almonds, 2 pounds of aniseed, 20 pounds of whole rice, 2 pounds of red and white confit, and 2 gallons of olive oil. They also used 50 gallons of milk, 10 gallons of cream, 1,000 eggs, and 6 gallons of butter. Whew, that sounds like a recipe for weaponized fruitcake. The feast began at 4 p.m., with 3 courses planned of 16, 16, and 17 dishes in order. But in true Richard fashion, he spent so much time talking that the guests never got to experience the third course. The course, my kingdom for the course. Other monarchs learned from this and cut down the number of dishes served at their coronation meals, and hopefully the amount of eggs. George IV was crowned King of England in 1821 at Westminster Abbey, and the coronation banquet took place, naturally, in Westminster Hall. Guests at both events included English nobility, knights, dukes, barons, and foreign dignitaries. And George was out to impress the lot of them. The guests lucky enough to have front row seats to the banquet were not disappointed. Several ceremonial traditions took place throughout the meal, including the ride of the king's champion. A rider and horse entered the hall, accompanied by two heralds, one of whom asked the guests if anybody challenged the validity of the newly crowned king. The champion then threw a gauntlet to the floor in preparation to defend the king's honor. This spectacle was repeated 3 times down the length of the banquet hall. And now you know where medieval times gets it from. All told, the event cost the modern equivalent of $27 million, which is a bit much for a shindig. As a result, in 1931, William IV decided to forego his coronation banquet as a cost-saving measure. Way to ruin it for everyone, George. Before he unexpectedly became Tsar Nicholas I, Grand Duke Nicholas of Russia toured the world. He met with other dignitaries, viewed the industrial advances that England had made, and enjoyed sport in the countryside. The British Prince Regent, who eventually became King George IV, held a ball for Nicholas at the Royal Pavilion in Brighton Beach. 45 guests attended the dinner and ball, including Nicholas's entourage as well as other foreign dignitaries. The menu, from French chef Marie-Antoine Carême, boasted more than 100 dishes, including 8 soups, 8 fish dishes, 40 entrees, and 32 desserts. There were also more wild offerings like haunch of boar and pheasant. Truly a meal fit for a czar. When you hear the name Nero, you probably either think of the evil Romulan in 2009 Star Trek or the Roman emperor who allegedly fiddled while Rome burned. Hard to say who was more villainous. Before that fiery upheaval, the Roman Emperor Nero hosted banquets known for their extravagance. According to Latin historian Suetonius, Nero entertained his Roman constituents in a banquet hall that rotated, reflecting the changing skies outside. Suetonius also mentioned sliding panels that created cascades of flowers and perfumes. Nero's banquets also featured the reciting of poetry and songs, before turning into all-night orgies. He may have been a vicious tyrant, but he did know how to have a good time. Cleopatra is one of the most famous people in history, thanks to countless legends and big screen portrayals by the likes of Elizabeth Taylor and Tamara Dobson. Well, she was technically Cleopatra Jones, but that still counts. But did you know about the time she spent the equivalent of $500,000 on a single cup of wine? According to writer Pliny the Elder, Cleopatra and Mark Antony were enjoying one of their many feasts when they brokered a bet. In trying to prove the superiority of Egyptian wealth, the queen wagered that she could spend 10 million sesterces, worth about $500,000 today, on one dinner. Antony accepted the wager, not thinking his lover could fulfill her boast. The following day, servants set out a veritable feast, but Cleopatra assured Antony that she alone would consume the dish that would settle their bet. She called for dessert, and a single cup was placed in front of her. She pulled one of her pearl earrings out of her ear and dropped it in her goblet. Once the pearl dissolved, she drank the whole thing down. Before she could dissolve the second earring, the referee of the affair declared her the winner. Cleopatra wasn't famous for nothing. In 1454, Philip the Good, Duke of Burgundy, hosted an elaborate feast to persuade the King of France to let him lead a crusade. France controlled Burgundy, but Philip amassed enough wealth, power, and popularity to become a premier prince of Europe. Hence, the banquet known as the Feast of the Pheasant had to strike a balance between showing the power of Burgundy and proving the loyalty Philip held toward France. Philip and courtier Olivier de la Marche planned the soirée to the smallest detail. 30 extra artists, including musicians and actors, were hired for the evening. The menu included 48 dishes and 27 entremets that would come out between main courses, most of which were accompanied by elaborate sculptures. Because why not? Who doesn't want a fun little statue with their appetizers? Toward the end of the meal, Philip gave a speech about leading a crusade to reclaim the city of Constantinople, which the Ottoman army had claimed the year before. He made everyone in attendance swear an oath to defend the church by placing a hand on a pheasant held by 2 women. It was a nice try, but despite the implied unbreakability of an oath sworn on a bird, Philip never got his crusade. Caw-caw. The French court of Louis XIV was a tumultuous place to find yourself, especially as a noble. Louis was an absolute monarch, so ambitious nobles were always trying to impress him and stay in his good graces. One such person was Nicolas Fouquet, a financial bureaucrat from the upper echelon of society. He commissioned architect Louis Laveau, painter and interior decorator Charles Lebrun, and landscape designer André Le Nôtre to build a magnificent chateau. After many years and many francs, the estate of Vaux-le-Vicomte stood as a masterpiece of architecture. And in 1661, Fouquet held a housewarming party and even had a space decorated specifically to encourage the king to visit. This turned out to be a terrible idea. Listen, not every party can be a hit. Unfortunately, Louis was on the lookout for any political rivals, and the siren-like sumptuousness of Vaux, abetted by whispers in the king's ear, convinced Louis that Fouquet had to go. He accused Fouquet of embezzling royal funds, found him guilty, and imprisoned him for life. Fouquet perished in prison, never to return to his chateau again. And in a cruel postscript, Louis used the same architectural team as Fouquet to renovate his hunting lodge, Versailles. Sacre bleu! In the late 1400s, the Borgia family held society in their grasp, both politically and spiritually. Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI in August 1492, making many ecclesiastical changes in his 11 years while maneuvering his family into the upper echelons of society. It's good to be the Pope. One of these moves included making his teenage son, Cesare, a cardinal. And according to Johann Burchard, the papal minister of ceremonies, it was Cesare who planned the infamous Banquet of the Chestnuts. In 1501, invited guests attended a banquet in Cesare's apartments in the Vatican, and among them were 50 courtesans. After the meal, the candelabras were moved to the floor, with chestnuts tossed down among them. The courtesans allegedly then got down on the floor and lewdly collected the chestnuts. Please, don't ask us to elaborate any further. The evening devolved into a contest to see who could sleep with the most courtesans, with prizes that included tunics, shoes, and barrettes. Not surprisingly, outrageous displays of decadence like the Banquet of the Chestnuts set the stage for the Protestant Reformation a few years later, and the Protestants only ate dry almonds. Thank you. So what do you think? Which of these parties would you have liked to attend? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.